and queens, welcome to Business Models for Creators, the show where we explore the realities of people living the creator dream and help you turn your creator dream into reality. I'm your host, Jasmine Love, and today our guest is Kallie Falandays, conversion copywriter and founder of Telltale Copywriting and Telltale Poetry. Kallie grew up in Delaware, then moved to Portugal 5 years ago and never looked back. Let's welcome Kallie to Business Models for Creators. And even though we can't hear you, let's make some noise for Kallie. Woo! Kallie in the house.
Woo-hoo!
I said Kallie in the house. Welcome, Kallie. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I think that was the best intro I've ever had. I'm super pumped to talk with you today. And I love this idea that we're living some sort of dream. I think it'll be really fun.
Yeah, you are definitely living the creator dream. I can't wait to get into it. I don't want to give too much away, your dual lives as a double creator. But let's jump right into our first segment. I call it content sponging. As creators, we have to absorb a lot of things to keep our creativity going. So I always like to ask, what are you watching? What are you reading? What are you listening to? Could be a podcast, an album, a Netflix special, whatever. What are you into right now?
God, well, I mean, I used to spend a lot of my time watching murder mysteries. I'm not going to lie, like Dateline all the way. And then I transitioned into Murder Makeup Mystery Monday, which is a YouTube series of this woman just putting makeup on and talking about murder mysteries. It's fantastic. I don't even put makeup on, but I love to watch it. But recently, I've been reading some poetry, some fiction. There's a really cool poet named Chen Chen. If you haven't read him, you should check out. And then, in terms of what I'm watching, I've been watching The Last of Us. I'm reading a couple different books. I'm one of those types of people that just has a lot going on. So it's hard to focus on one book at a time. So I'm reading a book called Mom Genes, which is about how motherhood shapes us genetically and what happens in our bodies when we give birth. And I'm just listening to motherhood podcasts because I had a baby. So I'm listening to an amazing podcast called Good Inside with Dr. Becky. I don't know if you have kids.
No,
or
I
you're
don't.
Aware. Okay. Well, she's amazing. I think she's lovely. And then I've just been listening slow indie. So I've been listening to on repeat this band called Choir Boy. And that's kind of what I've been up to. And then, of course, just reading my clients' work, right? So I'll switch between a fiction book. Right now I'm reading Mr. Fox to client work. So we're working on some really awesome poetry collections. But it is hard to find time in the day. So when I heard that question, I was like, what am I reading? Because, most days it's just about survival.
Yes.
So there's not a ton of time. But I love that question. I think it's really important to keep that up and to think about what inspires us.
So let's dive into our next segment, A Day in the Life of. This is where we explore the day-to-day in the life of a creator. But first, before we get to your daily habits and what you do, I want to know how you got to where you are. So you have a poetry editing business and you help people publish your poetry, and you're a conversion copywriter and own, I want to call it an agency. Would you call it an agency?
It's just me. So it's not really an agency, but I sometimes call it a studio. It sounds more, professional and legit, but it's really just me. Sometimes I'll, outsource and mentor another writer, but usually it's just one-on-one, partnering in-house with other agencies.
Okay, awesome. And so what I'm really curious about, because this is, some people say it's so different, poetry and copywriting, but how did you decide to do both? What came first? Were you a copywriter, then you got into poetry, or were you a poetry editor, then you got into copywriting? Tell me that narrative.
Yeah, so I think primarily, first and foremost, I was a poet from the beginning of my life. I mean, I think poetry, I think it's kind of the same thing as becoming a mother. You become a poet, right? It's not a career move in the sense that people are I'm going to be a lawyer. So I never was I'm going to be a poet. I just happened to, to be a poet and to write poetry. And so that came first. So I ended up getting my Master of Fine Arts at Wichita State. And during that time, I was also doing odd projects for what I call content mills. So at the time I was like pumping out, 2,000 words a day for companies that wanted different descriptions of Disney checkbooks, right? Like surprisingly, people were still trying to sell checkbooks and I was the person writing about them and it was awful. And I did that for about a year until I realized, I can kind of make some money. So simultaneously, as I was taking on poetry editing clients, I was also taking on copywriting clients. And I was able to start them up at the same time. So originally Telltale Poetry was a blog because I wanted to hear how poets got published. So I had a book I wanted to publish and I was really curious about how these people were winning awards and what they were doing. And I was offering editing services on the side. And over time, it started to build organically where I was getting more requests for the editing services. So I flipped it and started offering editing services with a blog on the side. Mm-hmm. And then with copywriting, it was similarly organic. Like I started working for a web design studio where I was crafting copy across their full client list. So they've always lived next to each other. And, probably my accountant would say too much. So like sometimes I was mixing, right, the income and I was just looking at it as the same, right? Like my income from Telltale Poetry, I was putting it into Telltale Copy, but they're very different business models because Telltale Poetry has a lot of overhead, whereas Telltale Copywriting, if it's just me providing copy, there's not a lot of overhead. So they are very different for me, the business structure sense, but I don't know if they're that different in terms of approach.
Yeah, and so you mentioned you got your master's and that's how you learned poetry. I'm curious, how did you learn conversion copy? I know you were writing for the content mills, but they won't teach you conversion copy. So how did you learn that craft?
Yeah, so I was doing that for a while. I think, when I started cutting my teeth at the design studio, there was a little bit of that, right? So we were talking about headlines, how to convert, landing pages, that sort of thing. But it wasn't until I decided to kind of go out on my own and start working one-on-one with clients that I really started learning the craft of conversion copywriting across all formats. And I took a couple classes like Copy School, Copywriter, Underground. There's some cool resources. But mostly it was just seeing what other businesses were doing and learning from them and then applying those, seeing what worked, testing, getting results, and actually looking at, how one word might change the results, right? So looking at it from a performance marketing mindset versus just like, oh, I'm crafting copy that sounds good. And I think those are very different, right? Anyone can craft, good sounding copy. And sometimes the copy that you think is going to convert is not what converts, right? Once you test it, you're like, that outperformed. How is that possible? But it is. And so I think that's why it's important to actually test instead of assuming, that we know what the audience wants.
Yeah, so tell me more about that. It sounds like you took a couple classes and you dove in and you learned on the job and you got your feedback from the market testing. And that is the best way, I think. But so many copywriters, me included when I was new, but luckily I didn't get too caught in this, but they take course after course after course, and then they do practice assignment after practice assignment. And me, even after I got paying clients, people were paying me good money, but I still kept wanting to take more courses, read more books, and practice more. How did you break that tendency that most copywriters have, that imposter syndrome, and just dive in and let the market teach you?
I think I was getting results. I mean, I saw from my, building Telltale Poetry, right, that one change can increase conversions by 300%. I mean, that's insane. Like, I don't usually share that number because it seems fake and it's just such a large difference. But I started seeing results and I started applying them. And I think formal education has its place. But of course, I didn't find any really formal training programs that I thought would help. But I did find mentors. So I worked with a woman named Suzanne Reeves, who runs an amazing design company called Art and Soul. And I think she's one of the most brilliant strategists on the market. I did some partnerships with Wolf Olins as a contractor where I was partnering with some strategy. And I think the way they approach strategy was the most rigorous I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. So I started, picking up and seeing what people were doing in the real world. And I think, really it's about applying what you know. So if you believe that you can write conversion copy, but you don't have anyone to write it for, well, write it for yourself, right? So write an ad, pitching your own services and see what that looks like. Write your own billboard. You don't have to obviously take out a billboard space. You could put it online, right? Start doing that daily. Start, writing 100 headlines for one product. You can even do it for fake products that you come up with, and just see what type of results you get, and apply what you know. Because like you said, I mean, you can get caught in that trap of like education, education, education. But there's that other part, which is application. And if we don't do that, I think we're missing the last half of it, right? Which is like, does this even work?
Yeah, and I love how you got mentors. Like, your story's kind of old and timey. Like, if you ever read the success books from the 30s and 40s, like Think and Grow Rich and stuff, all those people learned from mentors. And I just haven't seen that in the storyline in a while. So that was really cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and I don't even know if it wasn't like formalized like that. Like they never came in and said like, I'm your mentor. It was just these powerhouse women that I saw doing really cool things. Like she helped me, Sarah Rainwater, who runs Studio Rainwater, another amazing studio. I just saw how they were running their businesses. And of course I asked questions, it might be little things like, or looking at, how they're paying out their contractors or what their agreements look like. I also was following a lot of Ash Amberjay from the Middle Finger Project. I think now her company is called, well, anyway, it has a new name, but she's brilliant in terms of like talking about sales. And so basically what I would do is I would get these newsletters, right? And the newsletter would be like, make 8,000 a month. And then it would like give you some examples, and it wasn't like cheesy. It wasn't like, like these like really fishy marketing techniques. It was really just like how to apply this, like how to send a cold pitch email, that sort of thing. And so I read that and I was like, yeah, all right. And then I did it. And so it was just like, all right, why not? Like people are doing it. So I think it's finding a mentor that you can trust. Like obviously I'm not going to listen to any advice out there, even if other people are listening to it. I have to find someone that I believe in, that I see is doing cool stuff. And then, I can try to figure out how they're doing it and see if I can apply any of that to my own career.
Yes, and I love it. Application, application, application. That is what I'm getting, and it's such an important lesson.
Yeah, and I think, someone else might tell you no. Someone else might say, oh, no, you have to, it's super zen, take years of study and this and that, which is great. And for some people that works. But, people also have to pay the bills. And so you also have to figure out how to think on your feet and how to make it work with what you can offer. And so being able to look at your offerings from an objective perspective and think, okay, how can I make this work for my market? I think that's also, a skill that will take you far.
Yes. And now let's dive into your day to day. The reason I like to dive into the day to day is because a lot of creators see like a title or they see earnings report and they want to follow that, but then they get into something that's the wrong fit because they don't like the actual like day to day, the craft and the operation. So walk me through your day, but first let's start in the morning. Around what time do you wake up, and do you have a morning routine?
So no, I don't have a morning routine. This I should. Now I'm like, I'm gonna, but you know what? I never do. I never will. I always say like, yeah, I'm gonna wake up and I'm gonna go to yoga and I'm gonna meditate. I don't. You know what I do? I wake up anywhere from 8 to 10:30 a.m. and I immediately start working. So I have coffee. I don't even eat breakfast. Sorry, everybody. I just start and I dig into my work, and there's no morning routine. There's no meditation. I don't like time block. The structure is that like I have tasks I have to do and I know what they are. So sometimes I'll look at that from like how long that will take, that sort of perspective. But, I'm not super rigid with my schedule. I mean, I'm rigid with my output, right? Like making sure I'm actually achieving what I need to, making sure, the emails are handled. And so in some ways my day-to-day is a little bit reactive in that, I am responding to client requests, but it's also one where I'm looking at what I can do. So whether that's, writing a new blog post or reaching out, cold pitching a client that I like or something like that, there's a little bit of both. So I usually wake up, let's say it's 9 a.m. Let's give me that, Sometimes it's 10:30, but let's say it's 9, 8:30, 9. I'll start working. I'll dive into work. I usually will shift my time between my copywriting clients and Telltale Poetry. So what that means is, I might have, I don't know, 5 writing tasks to complete, and I'll just pump them out, right? So I'll look at the brief, I'll make sure I understand it, and I'll actually implement. So I'm actually writing copy from, let's say, 9 to 11. Then I usually take a break and go to the gym. I come back and I'm usually running through, I don't know, 12 to 24 Slack messages from, people at Telltale asking questions. Sometimes there's 30 emails to get through, sometimes more. And what that looks like is, a client might have a question on their barcode. And so, I might have to craft a response and then make sure that that information is uploaded to our project management software, which is called Notion. Make sure that the editor can see it. Sometimes I'm chasing down people to make sure they hit their deadline, which is my least favorite part. So it's a mix. I mean, for people who like juggling a lot, it's fun. But for people who get lost in their tasks or who struggle to find the time to work on multiple things at once, I think it can be very challenging.
Yes, and I'm actually shocked to hear that Telltale Poetry days and Telltale Copy days are the same days. I expect you to be like, okay, Monday is copy and Tuesday is poetry. So that's very interesting. They all can land on one day.
I mean, I guess it would be nice if it worked that way, but like life doesn't work that way. And I can't imagine letting I'm the type of person that if there's an email, I'm going to get to it. Like I really do not want to let it wait overnight, which is also part of my own anxiety, my own problems. But I think, ultimately people have questions throughout the week. And so I feel that it would be irresponsible of me to not give them that time, just because, I time blocked this day for copywriting. But there is something to be said for that. And that's something I might consider because it is a lot, right? You're switching between tasks, you're switching between clients. So at one point for Telltale Poetry, we had 90 active clients. Right now it's about 30. But, within that, one client might send 12 emails a day because they have a lot of questions. So it's, it can grow. It's not like copy where we're sort of, implementing and there's a little more structure with like meeting times and things like that. Like this is a passion project. And so you know how it goes when people are passionate, they have lots of questions. And so there is some sort of need to respond. Yeah. The same days I'm working on copy stuff.
Wow. And okay, so do you ever have a day where you just don't feel like working? Either you're tired, you didn't sleep well, or your brain is just not online, or are you just found your fit? Are you just motivated every day? I don't know if that's humanly possible, but are you?
I don't think it's humanly possible. I mean, of course there's days, sometimes hours, but usually the whole day where I'm just like today, I was struggling today. I was tired. I was hungry. I don't know. I ate so much, but I was still hungry. I just wasn't feeling good. I wasn't my best creative self. But you have to balance that because sometimes you have to work through that, right? Like if you're on a copy deadline, they don't really care. So for that reason, I like to try to start my projects as early as possible. I know a lot of writers like to start the day before the due date, but I like to give myself some time, right? Because it fluctuates. Some days I might be better. Maybe on Friday at 3 p.m. I'm not. Maybe Monday at 9 a.m. I'm not. I mean, you just have to find that. And I think obviously you can kind of guess, like usually I'm better in the mornings. I'm really active. My brain's working really well. By 5, right now it's 6 p.m. here, I'm starting to get slower, maybe more tired. So it is important for me to make sure that I can give my best self, whatever that means. So I no longer respond to emails at midnight, which I used to do just because I'm too tired. So I might make a mistake, an error might get through. So I find that it's better to create that space. But I don't think anyone is just like motivated all the time. I'm not, but I do push through it. So I'm not the type of person that will say, you know what, I don't feel good, so I'm not gonna. Sometimes I should be more like that, but I usually just say, I don't feel like it, and I'm gonna do my best. And I just try. And that can lead to some that can lead to burnout, right? But that's just the way that I am.
Yeah, and you mentioned one strategy of starting early so you have room before the deadline. Are there any other strategies you use to balance out the days you aren't motivated? you do also have a just do it mentality. You just push through. But are there any strategies you have in place or mantras you have or anything to make it happen?
Well, for Telltale Poetry, I mean, we set up a bunch of systems and like templates for most commonly asked questions. So if someone asks me something, like we have some ways to get them their answer. You know, sometimes we get, 15 paragraphs in a single email. So it's good to have something like that I can reference. So I think setting up structure. So if you know, for example, that maybe it's copy, that you're writing copy and your clients are always asking the same thing, well, start a document so that you can have your most common answers to that, whether it's like high level strategy or, small best practices. So I have a lot of that. But I would say, yeah, it's interesting with copy that can work because there's like very clear deadlines, but sometimes with Telltale Poetry, a client will just have a question and there is no plan, there's no structure, right? I just have to respond. So I just try to do it with grace and just to remind myself, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm here to help them get what they need. And sometimes what they need is an answer. And if I don't have the answer right away, I just let them know that, I'll work on it and get it back to them as quickly as possible. So I think open communication is really important. So if you know that you cannot complete a task, tell the other person. So if someone's waiting on you to get something done, like let them know, hey, I'm struggling with my mental health today, or I just don't feel good, or I have a cold or whatever. So this is going to be 2 days late, let them know. I think one of the biggest challenges with managing a team or managing people is that sort of thing. And reminding everyone like, it's okay to be late, but you got to say it. You got to tell people so that they can follow along.
Yeah, and with the managing of people, I'm curious, how did you learn that aspect of business? Is it like, yeah, it's, I don't want to call it an agency, but Telltale Poetry, you do have people working with you, a team. So how did you learn to manage and lead a team?
That has been really trial and error. And that's something I wish I had more formal training because it is hard. And, the art of giving feedback is not easy. So you might think, oh, I'm like charismatic, I'm a good leader. But when it comes to it, it's not easy. And I read a book by, I think it was Jason Fried, who started Basecamp, which is a project management system. I forget the name of the book, but there was a chapter where he talked about how when you're with people, and I'm going to misquote it, but basically when you speak with someone on your team, you can either fill them up or empty them out. And like they might not remember what you say, but they're going to remember that feeling that you gave them. And so you want to try to keep it net positive. So yeah, of course, every time you're not going to be able to fill people up, but like you want to try to do that as much as possible. And so, it's hard because when you're working, right, you're caught up in your stuff. So when you have people working for you, it's easy to just like whip off a Slack message like, hey, I need this, blah, 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 do this, do this, do this. You did this wrong. Mm-hmm. But that might get you what you need in the short term. But in the long term, is that really going to build like a strong relationship? I don't know. So I try to be mindful about the way in which I share feedback, like how I'm grouping it. I have a tendency to micromanage. So I think it's important as leaders to understand where our shortcomings are and like figure out how to watch for those. Cause of course I can't, or I haven't been able yet to get that 100% out of my system, but I need to be able to make sure it's not negatively influencing the people I'm working with. My brother is a really good leader. He's kind of running a team at a company called Hippo. And so I'll ask him for advice. I'm like, Jake, I don't know what to say. What should I do in this situation? He'll help me. He recommended getting a business coach, which, I don't have. I have had like coaches and therapists that I usually use to talk about kind of high level stuff and just trying to read more on, how to be a good leader, how to communicate effectively, how to make sure people are getting what they need, how to distill a brief, like a creative brief effectively. That's hard. So those, each part of it has some challenge. And I think I would be lying to say I'm a great leader. I'm 100% good at all of these things. But I think I do take care to try and build that up, because that's a skill, right? So I'm trying.
That's awesome. And it's also a skill to be able to recognize your blind spots and weaknesses and then find a way to fill in the gaps. I love how you find mentors everywhere. You're like, my brother, ask him, I found this book. So that's a skill in and of itself to recognize weaknesses and then be able to find the resources to fill it. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and I think like the same thing with mentors. Like, yeah, I trust my brother. I would ask him for advice like this, but I might not ask him for his feedback on a poem, right? Because it's just a different level. So being able to tell the difference, right, between what sort of feedback you can get from each type of person, and how much stake you're going to give it. Because even if he says something, it doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to follow it. But like having someone to soundboard off of is really, really helpful. And so I think it's important to build that sort of community. So when you have a question like, hey, I don't know how to deal with this, this person is missing a deadline, or this client is, angry, like how do I handle it? Like having someone that can listen to you, I think is helpful.
Yes, I totally agree. All right, now let's move on to our next segment, marketing and monetization methods, where we talk about how to make money as a creator. So I am curious, how do you make money as a creator? You have these two businesses, and what are your monetization methods? Like, are you charging hourly, flat fee? Do you have packages? Do you have subscriptions, products, services? Tell me the whole mix.
Yeah, so for Telltale Poetry, we do have packages. And we also have one-off. They can do like a la carte. So we have everything from a single poem edit, which is usually $85. And that includes, 2 rounds of deep critique, one round of deep critique, a round of line edits, a critique letter, 2 rounds of proofreading. So you might think 85 for one poem, but it's a very thorough edit, and it goes all the way up to our design and self-publishing support packages, which is everything from arranging the collection to doing a deep critique of each poem, going line by line in each poem, providing a 2-page critique letter on that work, providing a battle plan with suggestions on what to do next, all the way up to, designing the cover, the interior layout, the typesetting, helping choose a platform, getting your ISBN and all of that. So really someone should be able to find something within this range that they're excited about. And then for Telltale Copy, it depends. Sometimes it's hourly. I also have been known to do packages. So sometimes it's based on what the client needs, but I try not to be super prescriptive with that because I work with all sorts of clients. So instead of niching down, I work with people at all levels. So I'll try to find what makes the most sense for us at that time. I mean, my theory is that generally package-based rates are better for both people, but there are cases where hourly makes more sense, right? Because if you start charging by package and then there's more and more meetings, more and more things, right? And it becomes out of scope. You might as well have, charged hourly and done better. So I know there's this big debate, like hourly, package, whatever. But I think it's better to do, to do it case by case. Or at least that's what I found helpful, is to do it case by case. So that's really what we do. We also have some courses at Telltale that people can purchase. And yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And what are your courses? Are they self-paced courses? Are they live? Are they on the craft of poetry or on the business of poetry? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, they're all about craft of poetry. So we have a poetry and translation course. That's cool, even if you're not a translator and you don't speak another language. So it's more about how to use translation for creativity. We have a hone your craft course. This is for both new and experienced poets who want to learn more about things like line breaks, the difference between, what types of forms they have in poetry, how to use metaphor, how to find your voice. We also just launched a really cool children's poetry course with a poet named Lindsay Lesby. And that's for children like 8 to 12. And that's all about like the magic of poetry. Super fun. They're all asynchronous. We have a submission course as well on how to submit poems, how to strategize. And yeah, they're all online, all async. You can pay for feedback or not. So they're really good for people who, maybe want to do something on the side while they're doing other things, maybe do it on the weekends. They range from anywhere from 4 to 6 week courses. So there's a bunch of options if you guys are interested.
Yeah. And then tell me about the revenue stream makeup. What percentage of your revenue is your online courses? What is Telltale Poetry editing services, and what is conversion copy? Just rough percentages.
So I would say conversion copy is right now, I mean, it fluctuates year to year, but right now it's probably 75%. And then the rest is Telltale. The courses are really not a huge stream of income. So I wouldn't even say maybe 5%. just because we don't really pitch them. I mean, I think with Telltale Poetry, we're serving people who maybe are outside of academia. A lot of the clients that I have maybe are on Social Security. So we try to be affordable and approachable to a wide variety. So it's really a labor of love. I wouldn't say it's like a huge money-making machine, and that's not why I do it. The challenge with poetry, of course, is, with conversion copy, there's a big ROI. So, I can sell huge packages because I can prove.
And really quick, ROI is return on investment, just in case you don't know. But go ahead.
Yes, sorry, return on investment. So when I'm pitching a package to a corporation, it's going to be a little bit easier to pitch a huge number. Because, there's proof behind it and they'll get their money back, right? That's the theory. With poetry, for them, it's a labor of love too. And so there is no guarantee that even if we edit your book, even if it's beautiful, even if it's the best book in the whole wide world, you might not make your money back. And that's because of the market of poetry. It has nothing to do with their talent, has nothing to do with the quality of the work. But like, there are some of the best books published that are just sitting on shelves because they haven't been recognized, they haven't been known. And, I think when you look at poetry versus fiction versus nonfiction, I mean, the poetry market is a harder sell. Now it's getting better. There are poets, Rupi Kaur, for example, who have made a business of it, but I don't know how common that is. And so I try to keep that in mind, when I'm thinking about monetization or making a profit, right? And there have been months where we were not profitable at Telltale, but I kept it running because I believe in it, right? Because it's my baby and because I think it's valuable and important. And it's really about making people's dreams come true. So for most people that I work with, this is a bucket list item, right? They want to get their books out there. So it's very different from the people I work with in copywriting who, it is really like a money-making experience for them. And they're thinking, okay, how can I hit my bottom line? Like, how can I make sure that whatever you're doing is turning a profit for us or helping to turn a profit? So they're really different worlds in that sense.
Yeah. So I'm really curious, considering all of what you just said, why did you choose to do courses for Telltale Poetry, but no online courses for conversion copy?
Yeah, so I think with Telltale Poetry, it just happened organically. So I noticed that people really needed courses. Telltale Copy, I think I could. It never came up as a need. I think there's a lot of courses out there. And I think sometimes why I create another one if there's so many, right? So many you can take. And I think, unless you have a very interesting or specific angle, why add to the noise? And at the time, with Telltale Copywriting, there was nothing I wanted to add to that conversation. But with Telltale Poetry, there weren't a lot of courses for the audience I was reaching. And there was a real need from my clients that I saw that, they wanted to learn more. They maybe couldn't afford, the full package or working on it, but they really wanted help. And so this was a way to get them the help they needed without having them sign on for a larger package.
Oh, that is wonderful. I love the integrity in that answer. There's so many courses that teach you how to make courses that are just like, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what you know or don't know. Just whip together a course. And I love how you're like, this is not needed in the market, but this was, and I'm trying to help people and I made it affordable. And like, I don't know. I just love your whole answer, your whole approach. So.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think it's, organic. So like, for me with Telltale Poetry, it's not, I was telling my boyfriend last night that, I didn't set it. I wasn't like, I'm going to start a poetry business. Just like I wasn't like, I'm going to be a poet. Like it just happened. And it just so, I just learned like what people needed. So, I started offering manuscript editing and I saw that people wanted to publish. So I thought, well, instead of them going to somewhere else, we could just do it for them so they don't have to stress about like where to go and it gets confusing. And that's how the whole business was built. Just seeing like, oh, you need this? Like, sure, I can do that for you. You need this. And so then it, really built up in that way. And so I do think there's something to be said about, not joining that hype because yeah, it's true. Courses can make a lot of money. It's also true that my courses aren't making a lot of money, not because they're not well promoted, but I think, there's this belief of like, oh, it's just like a get rich quick scheme. Like everything, can be packaged like that. Like, oh yeah, just follow these 5 tips and you'll be a billionaire. like take a cold plunge and, in an ice cold ocean every morning and like, you'll never die. And it's like, okay, none of that's true. And so I just don't buy it.
Yeah, that is awesome. Now let's rewind. I love also how both your businesses were built pretty organically. Tell me how you made your first dollar as a businesswoman, whether it was with copy or poetry. How did you make your first dollar as an independent businesswoman?
I think I got paid $4 to edit a poem for if I'm remembering correctly, it was like a student who just needed some feedback. That was like one of the first dollars I made. And then Craigslist was my second. So it was back in the day, y'all. Craigslist, I got a really cool client who was writing a fiction book, actually. So it didn't really start with poetry. And then after a couple years of that, then I started realizing I could pitch on Craigslist. So I was pitching a lot out on Craigslist. And then after about 2 years of that, plus building up my blog, people started to reach out to me specifically from the website. So, I know a lot of people say, oh, get ads up and do this and do that, and people will come. But like for me and for Telltale, it was really a slow burn. And it just so happened that like I liked doing the blogs. And I cared about it. So, it was almost a surprise to me when people were coming like, oh, okay, yeah, I can help. But there was no, like, I wasn't doing like a 10-year plan on like how to get business. It just sort of happened.
Yeah, I love that. Those are my favorite business stories, the organic ones, where like you just were doing what you love, you filled a need, people needed help, and it just grew and grew. And I love your tenacity and longevity, because when you said 2 years, I was like, whew, that is a long time to grind at something,
Yeah.
but you liked it, I guess.
Yeah, for me, it wasn't a grind. Like, I had no end goal. Like, I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to start selling products, or like, I'm going to start helping people with their poems. I was just like, man, I think it's interesting to hear how people publish. And like, I think the world needs that information. Like, no one's sharing that. I just wanted it. So I was creating a product I wanted, or a service I wanted. And then over time, people started to recognize it, or, share it. I think there was like link building. People were sharing it online, and it just became, more and more exciting. And I think people do need it, right? It's like, if I always tell people, if I wanted to get into like ceramics or acting, right? I don't know where to go. So it would be cool to have an industry insider that would teach me without like thinking that I suck at it, right? I don't need to hear that. I need to hear like how I can improve and what I can do. And that's really the way we approach editing, as an act of kindness at Telltale versus, the gatekeepers of language or something.
Yes, love it. And now that you really are a business, your conversion copy is a business, Telltale Poetry is a business, how do you market yourself in each business, and how do you keep a steady stream of clients?
Yeah, so that's hard. I think right now with Telltale, one of the challenges is just like, because of the economy, people are not spending money on fun stuff. And in many ways, getting their book edited and published is a fun thing. And so at one point where we might have had 20, 30 clients sign on per month, now it might be 2 or 3. And so that's actually made me realize just yesterday that we had to scale back. And, what that looks like is, paring down the way, the team, like making it tighter and smaller, cutting back our miscellaneous expenses. So, paying to do social media, paying someone to run the ads, like just cutting back on that. Because, if we have all of this output, all of this money going out and not a ton coming in, well, it doesn't make sense to keep paying this money out. So there are ways for me to keep the business running. And in fact, it would just mean that, I would be handling all of that. But what I realized is, if the business is going back to where it was before, where, it's only a couple clients a month, that's still cool. And I can still serve them in the way that's good for me and good for them, but with much less stress, because at least for me, when I'm worried, like, oh my God, I have negative money this month coming in from this business, but, a lot coming in from this, it still doesn't work out, because then I would have to pull from my own savings to fund, the poetry business. And it just, as a business move, it just wasn't smart. So I have to do what makes sense to keep the business alive in whatever form. So just like I grew organically, sometimes it needs to, shrink organically, and maybe eventually it'll go back to that. But at first I was really sad, but then when I take the ego out of it, I have to think like, why would I be sad? Like, yeah, it just so happens. And right now people are not spending. So I cut back my spending too. And then when it grows, maybe, I bring someone on again, have a project manager and, all of those things. But if we don't need it, we don't need it. So it doesn't make sense to keep doing it like that.
Yeah, and so it sounds like you don't expend money on paid ads for Telltale Poetry. It's just organic who comes through the blog. Is that correct?
No, so we do have paid ads, but we paused. We were actually having a paid ad specialist that was helping, like, arrange and figure out what to do. But I recently paused on that. So we have the ads running, but not the specialist. So she's going to pause for a couple months so we can see, are the ads working? What can we cut really? To see what we really need. Obviously, the core of the business will stay alive. Like, we're not shutting down operations, but we are rethinking, or I am rethinking how we're spending and what we're spending on. And, if the client list has gone from, 100 to 40, well, then we have to operate in a different way.
Yeah, and so you have to pay at people. Are people still coming through your blog?
Yeah, so people still come organically. Sometimes they come through Instagram, they come through the blog, sometimes word of mouth. A lot of times there's referrals. So we have like a cool little referral program where if people refer their friend and they sign on, they get a kickback fee. So there's a lot of ways that people can come and do come in addition to paid ads, right? Because I think what you don't want to happen is when you are just paying to play, and then if you don't have the money to play, it doesn't work anymore. So I try to make sure it's like that. And, I think organically we also show up pretty high on Google. So in terms of rankings, we're good. So I think it's a mix.
Wait, so with the Google thing, did you study SEO or did you hire an SEO specialist, or how did you rank like that?
I did the SEO. I think it was just also kind of organic. I mean, this doesn't really help other people because I think it was a mix of like luck because, there's not a ton of competition with poetry. And with the way that I built it in the beginning where it was blogs, people were linking to that. So I think we gained some credibility. And the site's been around Telltale's been around for since like 2013, I think. So we've been around for a while. So I think that also, helps with the credibility and then like link building. But, I wasn't really looking for like, oh, what keywords do I need? It was just like writing blogs, again, based on what customers were asking that I thought like, oh, this could help them. So again, it was organic, but in terms of SEO, like I do understand the general requirements, but I'm not pushing out like a spoken wheel content strategy for Telltale Poetry. Like, we're working with like content buckets and, we're not like a content machine. It's really just like when I notice somebody needs something, I'll put up a post. And that seems to be helpful Telltale Copy is different. I don't know where we rank. If someone typed in, copywriter, I don't even know if we would show up. So I think they're again, very different.
Yeah. So about the Telltale Poetry, I'm going to call it the non-content strategy because it wasn't really a strategy. It actually is really helpful because it is more competitive now. I think you do have an advantage that you started when the internet was less crowded and also your niche wasn't crowded. But that's helpful because like everybody knows it, but they don't really think about it. You want to go where there's high demand, low competition, or even medium demand, low competition. So that's helpful to know. But also I want to start a blog and I've had blogs before, but I'm overwhelmed by like having to find keywords and like keyword score. But I like how you just said, if somebody has a question, I'll answer it through a blog and just keep doing that. So I like that that's an avenue. And I think that will be helpful to people that you don't have to be an SEO expert. You could just start out, answering people's questions and writing what you want to write that's helpful and putting it on your blog.
Yeah, that's also a strategy, right? So like, I think the one thing I would suggest is like write down the questions that you get on a daily or weekly or monthly basis. And if you're not getting questions, you can search for them. So you can go on other people's blogs in your niche. Let's say it's like automotive care, whatever. Go to an automotive website and see what people are asking for. Like, oh, do you guys have this cleaning product? Or like, should I use this product versus this product? Whatever. There's your blog, right? So I think there's a lot of ways to do that strategically so that you can find the topics that people are excited about. Obviously looking at Google Trends, you can like look at Reddit and Quora, and you can, search social media to see what people are asking. But I think as long as you're doing what you're actually interested in, it's going to be a little bit easier. So instead of looking like, let me analyze the companies with low demand, or high demand, low competition, right? And then, me starting like a pet company when it's not my passion. I think if you start the other way around, like imagine you just really like dancing and you like talking about dancing and you want to start a dancing support company, whatever. That's the way to go.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's come up in previous episodes of Business Models for Creators. Like, so many people say, oh, do what you love is bad advice and you can't do that. You have to go where the money is. But I think it takes a lot of tenacity to make it in anything, and you'll have more longevity and more creativity in solving problems and inspiration if you do follow your passion and follow what you love. So I think that is actually great advice.
But then I also wonder, like, how I get, like, okay, there's a lot of privilege in being able to do what you love. So I understand, like, yes, we just have to work for money also. So it's not like that. But I also think, like, how can you, like, of course, there's like these side hustles, right? You can like start ATMs or like, I don't know, do other things. But if you don't actually like it, then whenever there's a downturn, like for example, if I didn't like Telltale, the minute I was in the red, I would just shut the company down because what would I care? If it wasn't really my passion, but because it is my passion and I think it's valuable, like I'm going to keep it going, even if that means I'm putting my own money into it. So I just think it's a different mindset. And one is really focused, of course, on business and profit, which makes sense. And then my vision is more based on like the day to day, right? Like I'm involved in the company. So I could see if you're starting a business and offloading it, like maybe you're hiring a bunch of people right away, then yeah, start whatever is going to make the most amount of money possible. And don't worry if you love it. But if you're going to be involved in it every single day, you want to probably care about it at least a little.
Yeah, I agree. And then my perspective for saying do what you love is I'm neurodivergent. And I know some of my listeners are, some of my guests have been. Also, I've had like energy deficiencies from health problems. So I say if you have any type of health issue or like a different type of brain, like ADD, you want to love it because life is already hard enough to work for money. So it's just that much easier when you have a passion for it.
Yeah, but I still think, I think that also, it's hard because that advice, like, is, for some people, it's just simply not possible. Like, yeah, you want me to do what I love, but like, I have 6 kids and like, how am I going to do what I love when, I just need to feed them and I don't even have time to think about what I love. So I think there's always like a range. Like, yeah, if it's possible for you, chase that. But also, some people are just simply content doing something that they don't love, but that gives them money. And maybe they love that freedom of being able to finish work at 5 p.m. and spend time with their family. And like, that's amazing too. So I think I want to try to remember the other perspective, which is like, we can create the life that we want and be creative without making it a money-making pursuit if we want.
Yeah, actually, there's a whole book about that I really appreciate it. It's called Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. And she says you don't have to like haul off and quit your job to do what you love. Like she had a friend who loved figure skating, but her friend didn't drop everything and hire an Olympic coach and do figure skating. She worked her 9 to 5 and then just woke up early and then in the evening figure skated. And then also, since we're here, we should acknowledge that sometimes when you turn what you love into a career, it can take the love out of it when you're depending on it for money. So sometimes it is better to keep some people call it a muggle job, like the non-magical muggle grind job for the money. And then you can keep your
passion, love that.
Yeah, pure. And it's better for some people for sure.
Yeah, I could totally see that. And I think like in some ways I do have a muggle job. Like, I guess they're both, I don't really know how to put it, but like, I have used copywriting to keep the poetry business alive. So if you look at it, really, it's like one's a passion, one's a really career or like a professional path. But for me, I have passion for both. So it's a little bit easier in that sense.
Yeah. And so about the copy, the more business oriented job, how do you get clients? Are you cold pitching? Are you going to live events? Are you blogging and drawing people in? Like, how are you doing that?
Yeah. So mostly it's cold pitching. I think my website usually speaks for itself. So usually people see that and they either love me or hate me and they want to partner up or they don't. So that's very valuable. I think that was one of the best things I ever did, was just get a really nice website and to showcase my skills that way. But I do a couple things. I mean, I
wait,
pitch.
real quick about the website, because I love the website, but how are you getting traffic to the website?
I'm not really. I mean, I don't. So usually I cold pitch, and in that cold pitch, I'll include a link to the email. A link to the website. Mm-hmm. So really, my work is all about the hustle. So people come to me sometimes, right? So they might fill out the form on my website, but that's very rare. I would say 4%. Usually it's hustling. So I will send cold pitch emails. So I usually send 250 cold pitch emails a year. I'll respond to, I'll send emails to companies I want to work with and that I believe in. And I do that as often as I can. And then I'll also apply to stuff. So if I see a job that's full-time, but I know that I want a contract, I'll apply anyway and see if they're open to a contractor position. So a lot of times I like to get in with companies where I can be more full-time, so I don't have to continuously do the hustle, right? Because how can you actually focus on work if you're hustling all the time? So I usually find that balance where I'll try to partner with a company, maybe it's 1-2 years if possible. And then, see what else is out there. Maybe 40% of my income is coming from one company, and then the rest I can spend on like fun projects. Maybe people don't have a big budget, but that's okay. I can work with them. So I try to make it so that it can be reasonable, and I can reach the most amount of people, and also partner with companies I'm excited about.
Yeah, actually, this is like really, really juicy, because I've actually done something similar. So I really want to highlight this. A lot of freelancers are afraid of something that looks like a job or looks full time, because I hate to keep hammering like the bros who sell courses about courses or courses about getting rich, but so many people who demonize jobs. If it looks like a job is like bad and scary. And I used to fall into that, but you can get some really good, like what a freelancer would call retainer work, like steady work, if you apply for a job and negotiate a contract. So people, I'm telling you, look for job openings. That means they have a lot of copy that needs to be written, and you can get steady income, and you can negotiate a contract. I'm in-house now, but they said if I wanted to be a contractor, I could, but I personally wanted to try being in-house. So I'm in-house now, but it's out there. Companies will let you be contract for a full load of work. So I just really wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, and even if you looked at when you go to apply, look for places that are also looking for freelancers, 1099s. Sometimes they're looking for full-time contractors. So you get, you're still a contractor. You could still kind of negotiate, of course, with your hours and things like that. Maybe you can't make a late night meeting. That's usually fine. So, it looks like a job, it quacks like a job, but of course it's not a real job where, it's corporate America, which is, I think, what a lot of people think of when they think of a job.
Yeah. And then with your pitching, you said you send about 250 pitches a year. You contact companies you're interested in. What are you saying in these pitches?
So I actually have it on my blog. I have a cold pitch template that I usually use, but basically because these are like genuinely companies I care about, I've already been following them for some time. So I have something real to share, whether it's excitement over their product or what they've just done, or just something that I've done that I think can help them. So I usually reach out hey, I think what you were doing here was really cool. Here's why. Are you guys looking to hire a copywriter? Sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no, but I usually often get a response at least. So I think, again, it's instead of just blindly cold pitching, and I think, my blog is all about how to make cold pitching warm, right? It shouldn't be just these pitches that you're blasting out to people. Of course, we want it to be personalized, and we've all gotten those stupid messages on LinkedIn from someone how's your business going? And it's who are you? So we don't want that, right? Nobody wants that. Our inboxes are full. So we have to think, okay, what are we actually offering? Make it clear in the email, right? Are you looking for a contract role? Are you looking for free time? Are you looking for just to do a sample project for them? So I've known some people to even write some ideas in the email, hey, I noticed you guys just launched this thing. Here are 10 headlines you might want to use. Hit me up if you want to work together. It could be casual like that, or you could try to set up a meeting. So that's one way I like to reach out. But again, it's really for companies I'm excited about. So if they do respond, right, I actually want to work with them. So I would be so pumped if I got a call back, or if they said yeah, let's work together. So my advice is just to make sure you actually like the company before cold pitching, because you might get what you wish for.
Yeah, and that's important. You don't want to dread the work, and your enthusiasm or lack thereof will show in the pitch. So target companies you like. And I'm curious about a technique I heard about if you do it. Some people say when you quote pitch, reach out and point out where you can make improvements in their approach. So do you ever point out flaws like, oh, this could probably convert better if you did this, or do you stay away from that?
So I kind of think I love that idea, but I usually love it for like a second or third contact, just because I think if someone messaged me and they were like, "Hey, your website kind of sucks, and here's how to make it better," I'd be like, "Okay, pause." Like rude. So I wouldn't want that, even though it is valuable. Like you have something valuable to share. I usually save that for like once I get on a phone call, right? I might be like, "Oh, I have some suggestions. Are you down to hear it?" But I usually save that just because I think I would be turned off by something like that, and for me, it sounds more salesy and more like promo focused to be like, hey, these, two things could be better without first like sharing my credentials. Like, why would they even listen to me? So I try to think, it's kind of the same thing I was saying before, which is like, I try not to take advice, or really criticism from someone I wouldn't take advice from. And so if they don't already trust you, why would they care about your opinion on their website or their copy?
Yeah, that makes sense. And then about your pitches, do you have like a system for keeping track of pitches or a certain amount you send per week to equal that 250 a year?
So 250 a year was just like, I'm guessing on average. I usually just keep a spreadsheet. So if I email a company I like, I'll just write a note when I sent the email if I got a response. I'm not super, super like organized with it. It's not like I have to hit 250. It's more like when I'm excited, I'll do it. But I think a Google spreadsheet, or in this case, I'm using a Notion spreadsheet, really helps me. So I just like, keep track there. And that way I can see who responded, maybe who gave me an interview, who rejected me, that sort of thing. And that will also help in the future, when I'm in those moments where maybe I'm looking for a cool company to partner with, I can go back and see who I've spoken with in the past, maybe who wants to partner up again. So I can just reach out, and see if they have any openings.
Yes, and I also want to re-highlight something you said. It seems like you look more for long-term partnerships you can stay in for a little while, so you're not constantly pitching. You're more doing deliverables than selling.
Yeah, so I like to look for like small agencies that I can work with, or even bigger agencies that I think like, they have clients coming in, they always need work, maybe not, 5 days a week, but like sometimes. And that way, if I can create a good relationship with them, it's better. Although, the skills that you have, it is more like the skills that you would have in a full-time job, right? Like you have to be able to like show up, be communicative, do your work, sometimes deal with politics in a certain way. So it might not be for everyone, but that's the type of relationship I value. Even though it is fun. And at one point in my life, it was really great to like hop from project to project. I got to do tons of different things, get exposure to a ton of different stuff. And at the time, I was really interested in like researching and learning about a ton of different companies. But now, of course, with the baby, I'm more interested in like having a long-term, sort of thing where I can also see the impact of what I'm doing and actually track that and help iterate on that.
Yes, that's also important to note that it's easier to learn and grow and get feedback from the market and see the gradual impact you have on a company's growth when you're with them for a while and quite involved.
Yeah, otherwise it's just hard. I mean, they might give it to you, they might not, right? So they might not even like have that data for you, or you might not have been there long enough to really, do something with like an A/B test or to really see the results of what you provided. But with one-off projects, they might only have the budget to bring you on for that, one moment.
Yes, I actually struggled with that when I was a freelancer, but I wasn't understanding what I was missing. I wanted to learn more from the market and get more results, but I wasn't getting access to those results, and I couldn't like figure out where the gap was. Like, how can I get access to these numbers? How can I watch myself grow? And it's because I was just doing one-off projects, and then I may not work with the same person again until 6 months later, 9 months later. Then when I got in-house, I was able to see the numbers and see the company from the inside. I also could have done the same thing by getting a retainer, but yeah, it was the long-term thing that I was missing. So if you want results, you want to grow, and really see how your marketing is making an impact, it's important to work with the person more than once.
Yeah, or include that in your package, right? Like if you, I'm sure if you pitched a service where you also could extract and review the data, they'd probably be happy with that. But a lot of teams don't have the resources to pull that data for you, to organize it, right? They might not even know where to go to get it. So if you're offering that and that's something you want, that might be valuable as well, even for a one-off project.
Actually, that's great. And that adds more value to your offer. So yes, love it. Let's move on to our last segment, going deeper, where we get to know our creators on a more human level. So I noticed you've worn a lot of different hats and played a lot of different roles. Like sometimes you're the crafts person, like you're the person writing the copy or you're the person editing the poetry, but then you moved on to be the manager. You're managing the editors. You're also the businesswoman selling the services. And also you're the artist on the poetry side, the businesswoman on the copy side. So I'm curious, which part of your personality does each of these roles fulfill? Like what aspect of you? Or what need does each of these roles fulfill? And do you have a favorite role?
It's a really good question. I think the role shifts, or my favorite depends on the time of month, the time of day also. Sometimes I'm really interested in like mentoring and being that leader. Sometimes I just like want to write my own poems and whatever. But I think when you get into running a business and having other people rely on you, you also have to give back even when you don't want to. So even if, managing a team is not like my number one love, I also have to do it, right? Because they're getting paid. We need to keep things on track. We have deadlines. We have to make sure they're working. And like I said, I'm a bit of a micromanager. I'm a bit anxious. So in fact, like that part comes naturally to me, like setting deadlines, setting production schedules, making sure we're on time. But I would say, yeah, each one feels a more practical need. Like because the business is where it is, I have to show up and function in this way, but I don't really think about it like, I don't wake up and think like, oh, yay. Like I'm, doing these, 25 tasks today. It's more like doing it and then finding joy within that. So like, I say this when we're editing, like find something you love about the work, because it's much easier to provide feedback if you love it. Just like, sometimes you'll say like, if you're facing someone you don't like, pretend like you like them or say something nice about them in your head, and it'll be really a lot easier to communicate with them without being negative. So I try to do that in my own work. But I don't know if that answered your question.
Yes, it kind of did. And also, I want to take it outside of you. So we talked about the roles you play and what the roles do for you. I also want to help creators find the right role for them. So could you describe to me who's best suited to run a business like Telltale Poetry, like in the role you're in as a manager? What type of person is best suited to be an editor, like the type of people you hire? And what type of person is best suited to run something like your conversion copy business? Like what traits, what interests, what temperaments?
Yeah, I think poetry editing, I think obviously it has to be someone who's knowledgeable about the market itself. So like about poetry editing, like probably a poet. I think, and I don't think I will offend the poetry community by saying that like poets are generally not the most organized business leaders from what I've seen. I think they can be. And of course there are cases where like poets are out in the business world, but like they are very different mindsets. Like writing a poem and being creative is very different from like trying to balance a profit and loss chart and like look at what money is coming in and like deal with that sort of thing. So I don't know, because I think I haven't seen anyone who I thought you could do this. Not that they don't exist. I just don't know, because I know there's a lot of parts that people don't like. And from what, I have talked to some of my editors about like, hey, would you ever want to move into this, this sort of role where you are managing a team? And I think a lot of them might like the coaching aspect or the mentoring aspect, but when it comes to like managing the money or being responsible for other people, like they do not want that. So I think the same thing goes for any business. So if you have that dream, like you don't mind, being responsible in that way, you don't mind like thinking strategically about like an overall marketing plan, you don't mind functioning as the salesperson and potentially the editor and creative director. And, if you thrive on that, you would be a really good fit. But if you struggle, I think, to like keep up, like if you find that like you're forgetting about clients, letting them slip, generally just like don't care, I think it's going to be really hard to run a business at the level that you might want. For an editor, of course, again, they would have to be in the poetry world because editing poetry and prose are very different. So, I wouldn't necessarily look for a science editor to come on. I'm looking really specifically for poets. But again, even going from just a poet to an editor is very specific because you have to be able to catch errors. So you have to be really detail oriented. We use a style guide called Chicago Manual of Style. So you have to understand that or be willing to learn that and then apply that without applying your own poetic vision, right? Because these are not your poems, they're someone else's. So it's very, very hard to find that balance and to be able to present that in a way that is kind for the clients. Because again, they care deeply about their work. They've been writing for maybe 10, 20, 30 years. So, it would be ridiculous for you to come in and to mark it up with red ink and think that you know better. And so I try to find people that are malleable and like I said, they're kind. So that's the first thing I look for is like, are they kind? Can they present feedback in a kind way? And then it's about technical skills. Like, can they actually catch the error? Of course, you can teach that, but at some level, like it's kind of about what you know or what you're willing to learn. And then, of course, we have project managers. Again, you'd want to really be task oriented. You'd want to be kind of skilled at giving feedback, right? Like how to condense information in a way that is good for everyone, even if they're neurodivergent, like making sure that your information is easily accessible for a lot of different people. I think they also have a certain type of energy. Like I found that the project managers I work with are usually generally excited. They want to get things organized and they're not like finicky. So they understand that like there might be errors. They can still roll with the punches, but like they have a vision in mind for how things should go and they're going to help make it happen. So they're very direct in that way. And then for telltale copywriting, I mean, again, the challenges are different, right? There's very little overhead. But I think, for me, it's more of, instead of an agency, it is more like a freelancer experience. So again, it's like being willing to hustle, not being afraid to put yourself out there, keep coming back day after day, even if, you're not getting the results you want, and then being able to identify why you're not getting those results and how to get them, I think is important.
Yeah, so being strategic. And then just one more quick question about the poetry editors. Do they need formal education, or do you believe people need formal education, or not necessarily?
No, I don't care. I mean, I think the biggest thing is of course, with editing, you have to have a grasp. Like, so there's many different types of editing. There's developmental editing. We're looking at copy edits. We're looking at proofreading. But this person needs to have both, a high level understanding of poetry, like how to actually arrange it and like how that could look, as well as the really specific technical knowledge of, to use an Oxford comma or to use an M dash and what that looks like. But theoretically, no, you wouldn't necessarily need college for that. You could just do that on your own. So if you wanted to get into publishing for like fiction, book publishing, or poetry, you'd probably want to pick up a copy of Chicago Manual of Style, which is here. It's really big. So this is like, gets into like really specific stuff like, how to cite or, how to format mathematical equations on a page, how to write out parts of the world. Like, are they capitalized? Where are they capitalized? Do you use a hyphen in the middle of so-called? How to write letters when they're functioning as just letters. So there's a lot of information, but like, that's kind of the chunk of it. And then the rest is practice. So you could practice and get feedback. And at Telltale, we do nurture our editing team to kind of adhere to the Telltale styles. So I don't think you need formal education. I think for some things it's good. Like obviously you want a certain level of and like capacity for kind of exploring the English language. But like, I don't look at people's degrees. So if you have it or don't, I don't really care.
Awesome. I am genuinely curious about this. I almost asked it earlier, but I'll ask it now. Do you have a copywriting niche and why or why not?
It's a good question. I don't. I mean, most recently I've been partnering with SaaS companies. So that's like sort of a niche. I would say like if I was going to market myself as a niche, I would put that as my niche, but I don't position myself as having a niche. whereas Telltale Poetry is very much niched. Just because I don't feel like it. I think it's fun to work with a bunch of different clients. I find that my skills are great to work across company types. But, it is, some people love niching down into either company type or deliverable type. So, there are people who just focus on case studies. There are people who focus on just case studies for dentists. If you niche, you want to make sure that the market is big enough, that you're not niching down too far. And you want to make sure that the deliverable is something people want. So again, I don't know if case studies for dentists would be the best one, but you want to think strategically about that. But I personally don't.
Awesome. I think you're my second guest that doesn't niche. Everybody, I understand the value of niching, and I have a niche. I am niche, but I do want people to know you don't have to have a niche, and you can still make it.
Yeah, you can still make it. I think the thing that I will say is when you pitch yourself, when you present yourself, even if you don't have a niche, you want to make sure that you can actually serve that particular client in that particular need. So if you're pitching a fashion brand and you've only worked in automotives, it might be really hard to get that role unless you start making up mocks about billboards for fashion brands and show them that. So I think you do want to make sure you're pitching strategically and making sure that you can showcase how you can help that particular brand, even if you're not niched. So in that way, it's you're sort of presenting as a niche, even if you don't only focus on this one world.
That makes sense. What is your favorite thing about your career as a creator? So that's all your businesses combined. What's your favorite thing?
I think it's really helping people. I think with Telltale Poetry, what's so beautiful is that we have clients from all over the world who have been writing for 30, 40, 50 years, and they just have been holding on to this, and they really want it to be out in the world. We recently helped publish a gentleman's collection who was 100 years old, and he got to hold it right before he passed away, actually. And they had a whole party with his family, and they got the book cover. It's a beautiful book. It's called It's Yesterday. No, I'm sorry. It's Yesterday Already. And, that for me is just incredible. Seeing that someone can actually reach their goals. I mean, imagine publishing your own book at 100 and having your family hold it. That's amazing. And seeing them do that. So that's the part I love. And then of course, talking to people. I just love, hearing people's stories and figuring out how to solve challenging problems through language. So looking at, language from the lens of verbal strategy, I think is also really fun, which is sort of what you do when you put a poem together. I don't want to get crucified by the poetry community, but in many ways, those are similar.
Yeah, I love it. And what would you say is the most challenging thing about being a creator for you?
Well, I'm tired. I think just generally I'm sleepy and there's a lot of work. So that's really hard.
Yeah, I can definitely second that.
Yeah, people. I think you think oh, I'm gonna start my dream career and I'm gonna go to Bali, which some people do, but I found that more often than not, this means 80-hour weeks, not 20-hour weeks. So there's something to be said for that as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I love how you, and as well as a lot of my other guests, are very real. There's so many ads. I don't know if everybody is in the same ad feed as me, but I'm in this ad feed of become an entrepreneur, fire your boss, never work, sip pina coladas on the beach. And I am inundated with these ads. And
it's how are you doing that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's impossible.
Yeah. It's that sounds great, but also your computer's going to get sand in it. I'm going to be too drunk from the pina colada to work. I don't think that doesn't make sense for me. So, and I don't think it's real. I mean, I think we're living off this dream and whoever is selling that is making money off follow my 10 steps to become an entrepreneur. But is that real? Are you really going to be able to support your family on that? I think those are very different things. And it's important to be realistic about what the life looks like, right? The life of a creator, of course, is creating and it's production. There's a lot of it. And sometimes you have to do stuff you don't love.
Yes. And that is one of the core reasons I created this podcast, is so people can see the real life as a creator, choose if it's for them, and then figure out how to make it enjoyable if they do choose the path. So yes.
Yeah, because like you said, it could be like on the side, right? You work, you do your 9 to 5, and you do, ice skating or figure skating after work. Like it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Exactly. So I'm curious, what is something you would love to be invited to do or be a part of? Like either speaking at a podcast or doing something for a hobby or meeting someone or whatever it is. What would you love to be invited to do?
Oh my God, cool. Well, I've been like stalking Surreal. It's a cereal company based out of the UK, and like I want to work for them. So you guys can just tag me or drop my portfolio whenever you see them. We can just like spam them with my stuff. I think they're hilarious. So in terms of like copywriting, that is one company I'm like, I will write for you for free. I think you guys are so funny.
And it's cereal, like breakfast cereal?
So it's breakfast cereal. It's called Surreal cereal. It's a UK company. They came out with a bunch of like hilarious out of home ads recently where they got they got real people with famous names, like some random dude named Michael Jordan type of thing, and they did these whole billboard series with them because obviously they don't have like celebrity sponsorship. So for me, it was just seeing like a major company doing something scrappy, coming up with like a really fun, risky marketing campaign, and that's kind of the vibe I'm after.
Yeah, that sounds like a ton of fun. Oh my gosh, I love it. What's a personality trait or habit you would like to develop?
Like being more chill, I think would be good. Is that a personality trait? I think that would be helpful. I don't know if it's a
Yes,
personality trait.
chill is a personality trait. I will take it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would like that. I don't know if I'm going to ever get there, but like that's where I'm hoping to get.
Nice. Okay, if someone who is considering making their love for poetry a business came to you for advice, what advice would you give them?
Don't. No, I'm just kidding. I think I would say think very carefully about what that looks like for you, because in some ways, like you might love being very close to the poem, but if you turn it into a business, you might end up moving farther away from the pieces that you love. So like write down what you love about poetry. See if there's a way to do that without creating like a very expensive company that you have to run, and just try chasing that. If you love just providing feedback on poems, try to work with a company that lets you just provide feedback on poems. But if you really want to work on the full cycle, the 360 experience, then heck yeah. And you can email me if you have questions.
Nice. And what would you say to the people who love to write poetry?
In terms of how to make money from it?
Yeah, if they wanted to make a business out of it.
Yeah, that's another. I mean, I think we would need some pina coladas so we could really talk. I think, I would say get serious about your craft, focus on what you're actually trying to communicate. Do that. Of course, there's like marketing techniques, right? Like post your poems, do this and that. And like, I think those can come later, but like, I would say the first thing is like finish that collection, finish what you're working on, find your audience, start going to community events, start going to poetry readings, talking to other poets, talking to people who published, see how they did it. I'm averse to the idea that like poetry is a business, because in many ways, like poetry is a feeling. Like poetry is a thing that happens to you. It's not, poetry is something that you become a poet. So for me, the business and poetry are almost like different beasts. But I would say, because of course, if you want to make money from poetry, you should probably only submit your poems out to magazines that pay. Of course, it also costs to submit. So then you have to take that into consideration. But I would say, go to publishers that can pay, or start thinking about what type of profit you might make if you self-publish, right? Because then you keep the majority of your profits. They're not going to the publishing house. And then you can market them your way. You can hold on to your aesthetic. So I would say keep those in mind. We have a bunch of resources on the telltalepoetry.com blog about that, like traditional publishing versus self-publishing, royalty rates, how to figure it all out, how to market your book, how to get into bookstores. So that's a good place to start if you're beginning to think about how to turn this into a business or a lifestyle, or something that you do to earn profit.
Yes, thank you for that advice. I'm sure there are a ton of both out there, people who want to be editors and people who want to be poets. Okay, if someone wanted to be a professional conversion copywriter came to you for advice on what to do, what would you tell them?
I would say start working as soon as you can. Like start testing your theories. So for example, let's say you have your own website and you think that one change in your CTA might inspire conversion. Do
Really
that.
quick, CTA is call to action. Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. So your call to action, I would say start a newsletter list using something like ActiveCampaign or MailChimp, or even TinyLetter, I think is free, although I don't know if you can actually track whether people open it. But I would say start looking at that, send out emails, and then based on that, do what you think will get more results. So for example, try a different subject line, send it out again to the same amount of people, see if more people are opening that. And then keep testing your ideas, right? Because conversion is about converting people, and you can also test the conversion. So that's a very easy way to see if what you're doing is working. You can actually get results from that. And then once you have enough results, you can start, backing up your claims. And then you can go from there, and then you can start actually helping people. So, in the beginning, you might start off not getting a ton of money, but maybe you have a friend who's starting a website and you say, hey, let me try this out. Let me help you out, in exchange for whatever. And keep doing that until you build up a really solid portfolio. So start tracking what you do. So write down like conversion rates before, open rates before, like the amount of people that open the emails, or whether it's on the website, start looking at how many people came to the page and start tracking that data. So when you do get a positive result, you can use that in your portfolio.
Yes. And also have the knowledge for yourself so you know it works in the market.
Exactly.
Who would you like to see me interview on Business Models for Creators?
Oh, this is interesting. So I think I would interview Ash Amberjay, who I told you used to run the Middle Finger Project. She's a star. I interviewed her at Telltale Poetry a while back, and she's just phenomenal. I mean, if you want to learn about business tips, she's number one. I don't know how hard, she literally might be hard to get because she's that, she's a star. But I would say, yeah, she's a great one. And then also, I think you might want to reach out to a creator named Sophia Alving. It's Sofia Alvim, and she's a creator who also has her own amazing podcast. She's like a healer. I think she'd be really fun to talk to because she used to own an organizing business. So she also knows a lot of different levels of what it means to run a business, what that looks like, marketing techniques, sending out emails, that whole thing, and then also creating physical products. So she has both the service base, the physical product, and then the digital services. So in terms of
nice
encapsulating all of it, she would be incredible. So when we're done, I'll send you her email, and I think you would love her.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. And now if people want more Kallie Falandays, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can go to Telltale Poetry. It's Telltell poetry.com. You can check out Telltale Copywriting. Again, it's Tell twice. You can also go to KallieFalandays.com if you want to check out some poems. You can also email me at hello@telltalepoetry.com if you want to continue the conversation or get some advice for editing, poetry, copywriting, whatever you want. I'm here for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here, Kallie. This was so much fun and you shared so much wisdom. And everybody, thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe or leave a review depending upon where you're listening. And we will see you next time. Keep on creating.